Hello there, one and all, and thank you very much for tuning in to episode 521 of Love at First Scent with me, Persolaise, live on YouTube. The final video of the year in which we will be reviewing some new releases, because even though I'm going to do another one in a minute, or probably more like half an hour, that's going to be talking about some classic releases, and then we'll be back at some point over the course of the next weekend with my rundown of the top 10 perfumes of 2024. Anyway, I need to say that the first comment for this video goes to Phil, who says, hi. Hello to you, Phil. Gachunk is here as well, who says we need good vibes reviews. Now, you don't only just get good vibes with Persolaise, you know that, or you should know that by now. Mitra Kai is here as well, so is EcoJog, so is David, so is Cyrus and Stephanie and Aileen on Beauty. And I need to scroll down a little bit because I've lost the, oh gosh, lots and lots of you. Now that is a sample, says Dave NYC. Yes, that is this is a very, very beautiful mini set. Now, in the interests of full disclosure, I will say that I was given these by the Balmain, which, you know, Balmain is now a Lauder brand, but beautiful though these are, they are a little bit impractical. And so I, for myself, just got the somewhat more practical spray vials of all of the perfumes. So yes, this is here for the sake of presentation. This is here for the sake of actual usage and practicality. But that retails as well. I have to say that I think they've done a good job with the packaging. They've done a nice kind of, they do nice 10 ml travel sprays that I think you have to buy in sets of 3, but you decide what goes into your set of 3. They've done a kind of travel atomizer casing type thing. So actually that's probably a good way of getting into this review, because I must admit that my kind of suspicious bone started twitching a little bit when I saw how beautiful the presentation was, because I thought, okay, so has all of the money gone into the presentation? Balmain, as many of you will be aware, is a brand, as a couture brand, has been around for a very, very long time. And of course, decades ago, they gave us one of the greatest green perfumes ever made, if not the greatest, according to some, Vert, composed by the legendary Germain Cellier. They had a huge hit in the 80s with Ivoire, which was beloved by many. Then there were some reorchestrations, reformulations in the 90s and in the beginning of this century. Calice Becker reworked Vert. And then, as is so often the way with a lot of these brands, the perfumes kind of vanished and went away. And now they're back. They're back under the Estée Lauder banner. I am told that the actual creative director at the brand, Olivier Roustin, had something to do with these perfumes. I mean, probably us, you know, mere mortals, we will never know how true this is, but it's perfectly possible that he, you know, was presented with some options and decided which ones he liked and which ones he didn't. As a collection, I think they're interesting, and we will sort of talk more about our thoughts on them and my thoughts on them as we proceed. But we have got 8 to get through, and I think that certainly some are more interesting than others, and it would be good to spend a little bit of time on the ones that are more interesting. Orisira says, I wore vintage Vert yesterday, also a fan of Ambre Gris. Yeah, I remember that one, and there were lots of fans of that one too. Ivoire de Balmain is a memory, says Power Connection 1. My mother wore Vert, says Gender Goblin. Beautiful. Excited as Ma Griffe is one of my perfumes for life, says Aurora Borealis. Anyway, so what they've done here is they've created some new perfumes with some of the older names. So we now have a new Vert, we have a new Ivoire, we have a new Ebene, and which is the other one that's a sort of reworked, and we'll get to it at some point, I'm sure. Oh yeah, a Carbone. Carbone is back. Although Carbone, I think, was only new in the sort of 2010s reissue, wasn't it? Or have I got that wrong? But we need to make a start. And I think we could start with the one that, surprise, surprise, apparently is the best seller at the moment, but I personally find the least interesting. And it's Rouge, composed by Monsieur Quentin Biche. His name is going to come up a lot in this video. I have got pre-sprayed blotters as well. So let's kick things off with Rouge. Alex says, that's something I can't stand. Why do they use the old names and create something new? That is a very, very good question. And we could probably have a debate about that one day. I think the simple answer is because they know that if they make a perfume called Ivoire and a perfume called Vert, a lot of people are going to flock to try it because they'll be curious. And out of all of those people who flock to try it, maybe some of them will actually like it and spend their money on it. I mean, you know, when I say completely new, I don't mean completely and entirely new in every single case. Like the New Vert is a green perfume, but you know, we'll talk about all of that in a moment. Anyway, this is Rouge. Gentle Goblin says, every time I hear blotter, I think mermaid. I do as well. You know, I have to stop myself from saying bleeding mermaid. That was such a silly thing we did then. Right. So it's a curious piece of work. For me, it doesn't entirely work. It doesn't entirely convince, because what's happening here, I think, is that you've got on the one side, or maybe like at the top and the heart, a really quite lovely bouquet of flowers, and mostly white florals. You've got magnolia, quite a rich, kind of dense, dewy, osmanthusy magnolia. There's osmanthus in there for sure as well. Ylang ylang is kind of hovering in the background as well. A lily note. And if you could just smell that, then I think what you would have here is a very, very pretty, very attractive, not particularly red, but okay, very pretty, very attractive floral. But then kind of underneath it all, this sort of thing that's bubbling, maybe that's the red, because maybe it's like the lava that's bubbling beneath all of these florals. You have got the fairly aggressive, patchouli heavy, woody heavy Quentin Biche signature. Now, as you know, I rate Biche very, very, very highly. I think he is without question one of the most talented perfumers of his generation, one of the most talented perfumers working today. But he does seem to have a style that either needs some really, really stringent creative direction, or a style that we could say, you know, works better in some contexts than it does in others. Here, I just think it comes across as unhappy. And there's something, I mean, I guess it's an interesting way of presenting these white florals. But I don't buy it. I kind of think, well, what are you trying to be? And what are you trying to say? Pre-sprayed, let's do the pre, but then, you know, what do I know? Like I said, apparently this is the one that's getting people spending all of their money. Yeah, and as it goes on, it just becomes a bit angrier and a bit more acidic somehow, as though the sort of paint stripper qualities of those white florals, and white florals can have a kind of paint stripper quality, as though they are the bits that are being emphasized and brought to the foreground, which is interesting, but I don't think I find it especially attractive. So let's dispense with that one. Far more interesting is, and far more wearable, I think, is Quentin Biche's reworking of Carbone, or Carbone. Where's that? Here we go. I'm just seeing some of your comments here. Right, so let's label this one. My kind of favorite, but with reservations, of this one is a Quentin Biche as well. So, you know, don't forget, don't make no mistake, I should say, I remain a fanboy. So this is Carbone. Yeah, this is him presenting woods in a very, very strange light, as though they sort of come to us from another planet. I wonder if this makes use of the sand vetiver that they seem to like using quite a bit at Givaudan at the moment. and that Quentin Biche has used quite a bit as well. It gives things a kind of burnt, pyrogenic, borderline evil quality, which is interesting, right? I mean, and it also almost feels as though he's taken inspiration from Tom Ford Santal Blush, made by his colleague at Givaudan, Jan Vanier, and thought, okay, I'm gonna give this a kind of Quentin Biche spin, and take the sandalwood and take the leathers, and again just give them a kind of cackle. You can almost see like a kind of Dracula villain. I'm not a Bond villain. No, you couldn't see a Bond villain doing this, but a kind of Dracula villain draping his cape around him, his face, and giving an evil cackle and showing you his claw-like hands. Maybe Biche is an alien, says Horace. No, I don't think he is, actually. I think he's just a very, very interesting artist. This one is curious. I find it much, much more interesting than Rouge, much more interesting. And apparently this one is doing well too. And I think what makes it interesting, more interesting, is that amidst all of this kind of evil cackle type stuff, you've also got quite a marked, interesting rose note. And the rose sort of brings this touch of innocence and softness and humanity. Why this is the structure he decided to go for a scent called Carbone. I mean, you could go off on a whole speculative thing that, you know, carbon is the building block of all life, but I suspect he didn't even know it was going to be called Carbone when he was making it. And there's a kind of fuzzy texture to it. It's a very, very, very textured piece of work, which also makes it interesting. Anas says, looking forward to what he will be doing at Hermès. You are aware of what I'm referring to, aren't you? I have to say that, as far as I'm concerned, is at the moment nothing but a rumor, and it is a rumor that seems to have developed remarkable legs and has been running for quite some time. But I have spoken to certain people in question, and they have flat out denied that that is happening. So that's why I haven't talked about it, because as far as I'm aware, it is just a rumor. So this is pre-sprayed Carbone. Yeah, this one I have a lot more time for, because of that kind of strange vetiver, Santal blush, woody, rosy feel. It's curious. It's definitely worth giving it another spin. So there's your Carbone. And by the way, as far as I was able to find out, the original Carbone was a 2010 scent, and it was credited to Nathalie Lawson. Which ones should I save for later? I think we should do Vert. Let's do the Dominique Ropion, and he has done Ivoire of all things, which is not an easy act to follow. Where are the plotters? Now, Ivoire originally came out in 1980, and it was credited to Michel, is it E? You know, Hy. And then I think it went through a few versions, and certainly the most recent version prior to this one was one that, you know, had people pulling out their hair saying, you know, you've killed my Ivoire, etc., etc. I wasn't particularly familiar with the old one, but I do remember reading and, you know, just sort of in passing smelling it and being told that it was a very, very white, creamy, milky, lactonic type scent, in keeping with the name Ivoire. Now, this isn't like those sorts of things at all. It's a tuberose, and, you know, if you know your perfumery, if you know your perfumes, as soon as you kind of hear Dominique Ropion being put together with tuberose, your ears should start pricking, because after all, he gave us Carnal Flower, and he also happens to be one of the most talented and most accomplished perfumers of his generation, and still one of the best perfumers working today. So, you know, maybe putting aside that this is not going to be terribly similar to the original Ivoire, we can just sort of try and appreciate it as a new Dominique Ropion Ivoire. Dominique Ropion tuberose, you knew what I meant. And it is a well-done tuberose. It isn't as huge and grand and carnal as Carnal Flower. but it's got an interesting, I put down in my notes, I put down the word grubby. I said that it's a slightly grubby tuberose, which again, also why they decided to make this one Ivoire, I don't know, but I think we kind of need to put that one to one side for a moment, because ivory should be anything but grubby, right? And I think it's because what he's decided to do here is bring out the leatheriness, the leathery side. And that ties in with the kind of overall theme I would like to address in this collection. I think maybe when we do the next one, maybe when we get to doing Ebene, this emphasis on darker hues, on woodiness, it's not an especially faceted tuberose. You know, it's not a tuberose that I think we will keep coming back to in the way that we keep going back to Carnal Flower or, you know, certainly Fracas. But it is well done, and it is attractive, and it does kind of fill a gap in this collection, because I know that Rouge sells itself as a floral, but it's got so much of that woody stuff going on that it's difficult to see it as just a floral. This is the out and out floral, and I guess they decided they needed one. Pre-sprayed Ivoire. Where are you? Pre-sprayed Ivoire. Here you are. Is it aldehydic, says Eric? No, not particularly. And is it a green tuberose, says Shahika, right? Did I get that right? Have I remembered? Please give me a medal if I have. I guess it's a little bit green, actually, but if anything, it's leathery. I was... Good, I'm glad, Shahika. I was smelling Naomi Goods's Nuit de Bakélite the other day, which is a glorious tuberose, one of the best tuberoses of recent years. And that's got this kind of strange green quality to it. Yes, certainly there is some greenness in this one, but it is the connection is with green and leather. So pre-sprayed, yeah, it's, I mean, technically, obviously, superb, brilliant. It doesn't over-rely on the musks. Ropion has managed to keep that tuberose note going all the way through. And it's good stuff. It's good stuff. But whether it sort of will stand out enough to really have a strong life of its own, I don't know. Okay, let's move on to Ebene, which is done by another heavy hitter. This is Maurice Roussel's contribution to the range. Where is our Ebene? Not that one. Not that one. Must be that one then. And it was when I started smelling things like the Carbone, and they have one called Bronze, which we'll get to in a minute, and Ebene, and thinking about the fact that this is now an Estee Lauder brand, I wondered if the aesthetic they're going for, in a way, or the signature they're going for, is a bit Tom Ford. I wonder if they're wanting this to be like their next private blend collection. It's not, or their private blend brand, or their Tom Fordish brand. They retail, I think, at £180 for 50 mils, which, if memory serves, means that they're below the price range of Tom Ford at the moment, but someone will tell me if I've got that wrong. I usually see Ivoire at TK Maxx, says Gavin, but still, I thought they would have long gone. Anyway, so this is Ebene, which, do you know, when I was smelling it, I kind of thought, oh, please don't let this end up being your favorite one, because I thought, I mean, you can't have such basic tastes, but there is something so likable. I am tired. There is something so likable about this, because it's basically a brilliantly done amber with a nice kind of cedar note, really kind of gorgeous vanilla, benzoin, frankincense, peppery. And if you're thinking original Gucci pour Homme, you know, the one by Michel Amarac, you wouldn't be far off at all. Maybe Maurice Roussel. I mean, Maurice Roussel is the king of ambers. He does ambers brilliantly. He, of course, gave us Musc Ravageur, which was for Frederic Malle, which was his take on Shalimar. He also did the amber for Le Labo. He's really good at those. He did Amber Empire, I think, for Atkinson's. I'm pretty sure that was him. So he knows his ambers. He knows how to do them well. and this is just so suave. It's just like this instant kind of purr of delight. It's like, yes, okay, I will reach for the crowd pleaser, but this is a crowd pleaser with brains. I guess you could say that it's not particularly original, and it's probably the kind of thing that Maurice Roussel can make with his eyes closed and just sort of thinks, oh well, I'll give it a little bit of a twist at the top and do this, that, and the other. It's very Tom Ford. It's very Tom Ford with its kind of 80s, nearly 70s guy angle, and it was this one that actually started making me think whether the whole direction they're going with is Tom Ford. Where is the pre-sprayed? So pre-sprayed Ebene. The bottles are very Tom Ford, says Power Connection. Yeah, they. I mean, the bottles are also very original Balmain bottles. Rachel says, love Maurice Roussel, hope he's done good work. It is good. It's excellent work, of course, but I guess maybe to make it modern, there's a touch more ambery wood than you might want in the base, or maybe I'm just becoming hyperosmic to those things. But it's nicely done. The sweetness keeps things nicely balanced. It's a really, really well done, incensey inflected amber, really beautifully balsamic. I think the powdery quality of balsams comes through. I like it. I really like it. And I'm almost embarrassed to like it, but I do like it. Okay. Things get even more interesting now. We have got one by Shyamala Maison Dieu, I should say. And this is one called Bronze. And we were talking frankincense just a moment ago. This is their all-out incense. And again, you see the fact that, you know, there's these ambers and incenses and heavy woods. All of that is kind of Tom Fordish as well, which is no bad thing. You know, maybe Lauder need a brand to do the sort of thing that Tom Ford used to do well. Here we go. This is Bronze Shyamala Maison Dieu. Is ambergris in this collection, says Alex. No, they haven't done that one. They haven't done, you know, they haven't done Monsieur de Balmain. They haven't done, wasn't there a, was Jolie Madame a Balmain? You know, maybe they're saving some of those. Yeah, this is the kind of incense with the strong tobacco. Sorry, so I shouldn't have said that this is their out and out incense one. No, that's a Quentin one, isn't it? I think. Am I saying that correctly? Yeah, sorry, that one's coming up. Sorry. But Bronze does have a strong incense note, but this goes all tobacco. And this takes us into the realms of Chergui from Serge Lutin's beautiful scent. So it's tobacco and honey and patchouli, lots and lots of patchouli, and spices and outdoorsiness and sitting around a campfire. It's got that whole vibe going on, and it's very, very well done. Gavin says Balmain as a fashion brand is very Kardashian influencer. Oh, is it? The bottles are kind of Tom Ford, but the machine making them had something turn 45 degrees. Yeah. It really, really made me think lots of Chergui, but I suppose it's darker than Chergui. It's more about the bases. It's more about that kind of fur coat quality rather than being entirely outdoorsy. Chergui always makes me think of a beautiful pine forest somewhere with a fire burning. Aileen says, I really liked Bronze and I normally struggle with honey. I think it's very likable. I think it's very, very well done. Where's our pre-sprayed Bronze? Here we go. Yeah, the dry down, a touch on the thin side. I think the woods that you would have wanted there to be doing some of that kind of grounding work have scarpered. They've sort of run off somewhere, and what you're left with is a slightly thinner take on tobacco, which is a little bit of a shame. But the journey to that point is certainly enjoyable, and the tobacco note comes across as very, very, very realistic. in that kind of, you know, almost in the sort of way that makes you wish smoking wasn't so terrible for your health. I've never smoked in my life, but I am old enough to remember a time when actually pipe smoking wasn't that unusual, and where you could go into shops and, you know, see a collection of pipes and maybe buy a pipe for somebody who was a pipe smoker. And I used to love the smell of pipe tobacco. I mean, pipe tobacco was just the most heavenly thing, and the smell of somebody smoking a pipe was just amazing. So that one is kind of trying to do that sort of thing. Okay, so we have got 3 to go. Obviously, we've got Vert, that is coming up. Let's do Sel D'Ambre, which is another Quentin Biche. This is the out and out frankincense one. Is that the one here? The writing is tiny on this one. Yes, I believe this is the one. Okay, Sel D'Ambre. Now, Quentin has had a bit of a thing with salt this year, hasn't he? Because he's also given us Le Sel d'Issey for Issey Miyake. Rachel says, my first boss smoked a pipe in the workplace, a great scent memory. I mean, what was it about pipe tobacco? Why did pipe tobacco particularly have to be so much better at smelling than cigarette tobacco? I don't know. And Sel D'Ambre is rather nice, says Aileen. Yeah, I agree. So very, very marked molybdenum, frankincense opening, suitably flinty, lemony, mineralic, kind of takes you to church, but not quite, because then you do a kind of sidestep to a tempestuous beach. And I say tempestuous because you can feel the salt in the air, and the salt note has been really, really well done. And I've actually put in my notes here that it is genuinely a salty incense. So if Ebene is like our traditional sweet amber, this is like a kind of amber with all the sweetness stripped away. And that kind of makes it interesting. And I think it was the fact that in this release, we have got perfumes like Bronze, like Carbone, like Sel D'Ambre, like the upcoming Bleu Infini, that made me think, okay, somebody has actually tried to take this assignment seriously. And yes, okay, they've tried to make perfumes that they thought are going to sell and are actually going to make the brand some money, and then hopefully mean that they can continue to release interesting things. But there is some kind of there is at least a bit of a creativity agenda at play here as well, which is heartening, especially you know, if it's coming from a brand like Lauder. Dave NYC says, do we know who the creative director is for these? No, I'm afraid I don't. And I think officially the brand would tell us that it's Olivier Rousteing, which, I mean, okay, take that with a bit of a pinch of salt. I think the thing with Sel D'Ambre is that maybe it's a touch too single-minded. You know, it sort of does this salty frankincense thing all the way from top to bottom. Speaking of the bottom, let's have a sniff of the pre-sprayed blotter. Yeah, it's again maybe veering towards a touch of thinness. You know, maybe that's a budget thing. And also sometimes some incenses, I seem to remember there was an incense that was done for Armani Privé a few years ago. Some incenses, if you actually don't give them enough of a kind of vanillic balsamic bolstering, then they can become overly thin and mineralic in the base. I think a good example of that comes to mind is the incense that was done for Aedis de Venustus. What was that called? Was it called Copal Azure or Copal d'Azur? Lots of people loved that one, but I just thought it became a little bit too shrill. Now this doesn't do that at all, but it isn't quite as rounded in the base as it is at the beginning, but still very, very, very interesting piece of work. Now let us get to Vert. And just to make things even more controversial, I happen to have a bottle of the previous version of Vert. So I'm afraid I don't have vintage Vert. I won't spray it just yet, but this must be like, I don't know, 2010, 2009 Vert. Is it really, really evil of me to do this? Let's pop that on here, but I won't spray it just yet. So let's do Current Vert. Now, Current Vert is credited to Shyamala Maison and Calice Becker, which immediately should make you sit up and listen, because this version was also credited to Calice Becker. So she knows her Vert. Original, of course, was made by the one and only Germaine Cellier. I need to move this here, otherwise I can't write. So let's pop that back. Shall we do a little bit of rearranging so we can make room for these folks? Does that work? Yeah, that kind of works. I actually think Current Vert is quite interesting. I have 3 iterations of Vert, and this new one left me speechless, says Aileen. Okay, but you have to tell us why. You have to tell us why. Please, please don't just leave us hanging there. Right, so here we go. I have sprayed Current Vert. So what do you get at the beginning? You do get something that is definitely green. Gavin says, do you not think the credit for Becker might just be that the new person adapted the formula and that she may not have had anything to do with it in the present? That's possible. That's possible, perfectly possible, but I don't know. How exciting must it be, says Oris, to be asked to work on something like Vert? Well, you would hope that it would be exciting, right? And I'm sure a perfumer like Shyamala Maison would have been suitably excited. This is a kind of minty green. It's a grassy green. There is a suggestion of galbanum there, but it's not that immediate hit of green galbanum that I think you got from original Vert. Rachel says, sounds like I'll be ordering the sample set before the end of the live. It is worth ordering, absolutely worth ordering, Rachel. And I mean, I don't know how much it costs in the US, but I think it's a reasonable price for 8 vials and very nicely presented. You could always give them to somebody. Aileen says, I really disliked this new Vert. It smelled like a candle to me and not a good one. Interesting. Now, I deliberately haven't sprayed this one yet. I will do that in a moment. But what I don't remember is Vert going kind of melony fruity. And I think maybe that's what they've decided to do here to bolster the greenness. Now, a couple of years ago, Frederic Malle, under the Estee Lauder banner, gave us Synthetic Jungle, which is now called Synthetic Nature, composed by Anne Filippo. And that was like a crazy green perfume, super green. But one way that green, that kind of sharp, almost acidic greenness was pushed was through a massive use of a rhubarb note at the beginning. Now, this doesn't do that, but they've obviously thought, okay, so what do we do to kind of convey this hyper green sense, this wind-swept hyper green sense? And they've gone for melon, particularly a Givaudan material called calypsone, and it does have a kind of aqueous fruit quality. Is it a honeydew melon? Is it a watermelon? You're not quite sure. But I guess what that does is it takes away a kind of diva-ish drama of the original Vert. And I think that's what makes this, that's the defining sort of a personality trait of this Vert, is that it's a pleasant wind. It's a pleasant green wind, whereas I think the original one was a kind of force of nature wind that was going to, you either had to go along with it or it was going to kind of just ravage you and leave you in bits lying on the side of the road. What's the pre-sprayed Vert doing? Yeah, it's pleasant. It's very pleasant, and it's not hyper green. It doesn't scream green. Right, I'm going to do this. I can't say vintage because it's obviously not vintage, but it is the version that we had prior to this one. So let's label this. I haven't smelt this for the longest time, but I have looked after the bottle. There we are. So presumably the juice is in good condition still. Right, is it going to hit me differently? Oh gosh. Well, this one is almost like shampooey, leathery green. I didn't remember it like that at all. But it also feels vintagey. It almost feels like if somebody at Guerlain had come along and decided to do a Vert. I'm just going to let that develop there for a bit. That's curious. I didn't remember like that being like that at all. And we are left with Bleu Infini. Let's pop that on there, which I think is probably, have I just sprayed someone here? Yes, I have. I think is probably my favorite of this collection, but I don't know that for sure yet because I also know that I'm really, really fond of Ebene. But this one is curious, and let me just kind of respray it to get the effect going again. When I first smelt this, okay, yeah, I was really, really, really taken with it when I first smelt it, to the point where now I have pretty much finalized my list of the top 10 perfumes for the year. But when I started smelling this one, I thought, oh dear, is this actually going to make me rethink my top 10? And I'm not exaggerating. I really, really loved the opening that much that I thought, is it going to shake things up? And why is that? It's really curious, the opening of this. There's something fenugreek-like, like really, really dry, rasping spices, like turmeric, notes that you don't come across. These aren't listed notes. This is just what I'm smelling. I think it's meant to make us think of like a sort of beautiful beach somewhere, but I just thought, yes, okay, whatever. Just it's like a sun-parched island covered in herbs and really, really bitter, dry herbs like thyme and tarragon. So the driest herbs you can imagine, the driest spices you can imagine. And it's kind of crackling. It also feels as though maybe this landscape has been partially or maybe even fully destroyed by a fire, so that everywhere as you're walking, twigs are crackling underfoot. It's very, very, very evocative, very, very interesting. But what have I said here? Actually, I've written peppery fenugreek, and that it has this beautiful herbal quality, and that's it. And then it almost started making me think there's something gingery about, the dryness of ginger. And then I suddenly thought, gosh, it's making me think of Hermès Jardin après la mousson, which is, I think, so far the only discontinued Jardin from Hermès. Beautiful Jean-Claude Eleanor composition that probably was just too weird and too strange to be successful. I'm so glad that I've got a bottle in my collection, because that also does a kind of strange gingery tobacco leafy thing, and you're not quite sure whether you can you can work it out. Is it aqueous? Is it marine? Is it dry? Is it herbal? And it's just fascinating. It's doing all of these sorts of things, and I keep wanting to smell it. But as it goes on, you probably know what I'm going to say. It just does that somewhat repetitive Quentin Biche thing a little bit too much, and we're kind of back in the territory of Marc-Antoine Barrois, Ganymede, with that big patchouli, akigala wood, leather type thing, the same sort of base that we also got in his Le Sel d'Ambre for Issey Miyake. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that, except that when it came to thinking about my top 10, I thought, so does that mean I have to take away some marks for originality? Because it just does that Quentin Biche thing. And I'm smelling the pre-sprayed one here. And, I think if I were to sort of give this blotter to any of you and say, can you tell me which contemporary perfumer might have made this? I think a lot of you would have said Quentin Biche. Now, is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? I don't know. Discuss. But I just found myself feeling a tiny bit disappointed, thinking, oh, after that tremendous start, I wish you'd gone a slightly different direction. Wish you'd done something tiny bit less predictable. But still interesting nonetheless. And so that is your lot. Let me just smell that older Vert again. Yeah, I don't remember this one. This isn't actually particularly green. The new one is greener, weirdly, unless the juice has turned a bit. Yeah, the new one is definitely greener. I need to try and get my hands on some vintage Vert. Anyway, that is the final new perfumes video of the year. But as promised, just to make sure we end the year on an absolute high, not counting the best perfumes of the year video, we will come back with 2 perfumes that are celebrating their 30th anniversary this year. But thank you very much for watching this one, and I will see you soon. Bye now.